This is the abstract, and it's also the talk outline. I repeat these paragraphs here above various slides throughout to show the progress. So this is an attempt to make a scientific story about spiritual truth. I'm in the Diamond Heart work for a long time. And I'm also a biophysicist. I studied at Berkeley with Walter Freeman and Mo Hirsch, working on nonlinear dynamical models. Mo is in math, Walter's in physiology, of cortical oscillations, oscillating cortical areas that transmit information when they come into synchrony and create the stream of attention, the inner movie, if you want. And turns out to be very critical for spiritual work, since spiritual practices are all about attention and learning to pay attention to your immediate experience rather than your mental constructs. And so any scientific story or any spiritual word teaching, and they are all full of words in their teachings, run up against a certain limit, which is that the map is never the territory, or ideas are never the thing that they're meant to represent. They can more closely, more usefully represent, or less, but they're never going to be the same thing. So you're never going to solve the hard problem with any kind of language or representation. However, spiritual work does solve the hard problem in that it lets you experience reality directly. You cannot get out of reality. You're plugged into it. You're made of it. You're made of awareness, of course, in the spiritual set of assumptions that we're starting with here. And so you can know by being. And that expands your awareness outside of the conceptual, of the habitual categories that everybody is using to interpret the world. And we tend to get caught up and live in our little language world instead of the actual real world, and spiritual work is the antidote to that. And it also expands your capacity to use your intuition creatively, to tap into the creative source of the unfoldment of the entire universe, and so it helps you do science better, or anything else. So it expands intuition. Okay, so if everything is made of consciousness, what in science can help us with that? And there's a thing called superconductivity and superfluidity. This is called Bose-Einstein condensation, and it's an actual physical phenomena at the macroscopic level, indicating that behaves. It's a quantum phenomena, but it's up at the macroscopic level, which is what we're going to say is happening in the brain, very like Hameroff has been talking here. Okay, so let's look at this thing. It's a set of helium-4 atoms. When you cool them down near absolute zero, they become completely delocalized. That's a buzzword. That means superposition. That means you can't say where any atom is. All the positions are completely uncertain across the whole hand-sized superfluid, and it's completely in instantaneous contact with itself. It rejects impurities, so it seems to know its own character, and my interest is in whatever the essence of this is. We have names for it. We have superfluid helium. We say it's helium atoms. We've got little mental models of all that stuff, and that's great. That's where we're going to work. But you must always remember that there's some essential aspect of reality that is captured in this. And in the talk I want to talk about how that works up through levels of manifestation, atoms, molecules, up to the brain, and you can see a thread. You can see how the superfluid, the superposition of possibilities maintains itself. So any atom is possibly in any other state in this system. So let's watch it go here. If this will make it work. Okay. So right now they're reducing the temperature in this, which drops the temperature, reducing the pressure on this, which drops the temperature the last degree or so to the phase transition. Here it goes. It's on its way to the superfluid state, where it goes kabam, completely still. So Rupert Spira will say that the stillness is this is our model for the, it's a physical case of a model for the absolute background screen of awareness in Advaita. There's no form, there's no structure in it. It would be the absolute background awareness of which everything else is made. So another phenomenon about this they're about to show you, as soon as it goes through the transition again, all of a sudden has no friction in it, no viscosity. It now leaks through the bottom of this thing, through atomic-sized holes in the container that it couldn't get through before when it was still a conventional fluid. Okay, here's another thing that it does. It defies gravity in a sense if you want. It leaks out of the side of this thing and comes down. It goes up the side because it knows somehow, or it explores frictionlessly and discovers that it can reduce its energy by dropping down. Okay, so this is the stuff that's assumed to be the source of the Big Bang in superfluid vacuum theory anyway. Everybody has this notion that it's a self-reinforcing fluctuation of the background vacuum, which we're going to say is a superfluid here in this story. We get to make up stuff in the story to fit a spiritual story, where there's gaps in the science. And we try to tighten up the science as much as we can to make a coherent story that fits science as well as tells a spiritual story that can inspire your understanding of things, such as beyond space-time, such as the unity, how you can experience the unity of the universe. So this is a picture of pattern formation from the superfluid, and as you go through here, it's all radiation up in the first 3 minutes, but it starts to have structure as temperature changes. This is like an embryonic process. First there's rapid inflation, and there's a superfluid theory for how that occurs. Then when it gets to another state, it slows down, the inflation slows down. So it's got you can view this as a self-organizing process. And then it takes 300,000 years to go from protons and neutrons and electrons up to atoms. And this is a considerably more complicated structure. Atoms sit at rest, but the electrons around them are a delocalized cloud of probability of where it's at. So the possibility of superposition, you could think of this as again, it's whatever the essential character of the superfluid is. The quantum stuff is a nice ignorant word expressing our ignorance of what it's really going to be, except that what we can know. If I ask you, are you aware, as Rupert does, you look inside and you say, yeah. Well, you don't need language for that, you don't need reason, you don't need inference, it's direct. And in fact, you know it absolutely that you are aware. And that's the only thing you know absolutely. Everything else is direct, indirect inference, as we're doing now, using symbolic relative language is the way Rupert talks about it. Okay, so we're going to trace it up through here. Then you build the macroscopic universe, which takes a much longer time. Gravitation starts to, these gases start to condense into black quasars and galaxies, generating carbon and so forth. Then we get biological evolution up here on the surface of the planet with the right temperature gradient. There's a flow of energy through from the sun, which allows all kinds of exploration. Always, there's a quantum superposition. The Schrodinger equation is just for the entire closed universe is just a superposition of wave-like objects. Quantum field theory is all fields. There's no particles, in a sense. There's nothing Newtonian physics about it. So then we get to biological evolution, and we get to us, and we are very special in this game because we have language which gives us a second reflective capability. One idea about this is very Whitehead, which is that these stable objects like atoms have self-recognition. They maintain their structure by self-recognition, self-reflection, feedback. And when we get here, we've had the genetic algorithms, we have quantum computation at the molecular level, and we get, through the mirroring system of our brain, we mirror ourselves. We have a second reflection capability, and we have a second generating exploration capacity. We evolved by ideas which are Lamarckian and with the internet insanely rapid, and it's not clear we are headed for some monster transformation right now. both technologically, scientifically, politically, economically, spiritually, it is a zoo. It's going to be something extraordinary. Hard to say how painful or fun it'll be, but okay, so we are going to focus here on the biology and see how the superfluid character, the superposition character on the quantum search works in our cells. Okay, so here's how a superfluid forms structure. As you rotate that cylinder, say that you saw the fluid in, it forms quantized vortices. Notice it doesn't start to, around the rim, go with the rotation or anything like it. It works as a completely holistic system. And it forms this completely regular structure, and a vortex is like a whirlpool in your bathtub as the water goes down, and it's organized around a central filament structure, so already strings as an organizing factor come in. And as you increase the speed of rotation and increase the temperature of the system, it starts to form vortex tangles and bundles, and a paper out of MIT describes how this can, recombination of these of loops and so forth, can cause the inflation stage of the universe. So here we're generating space and time from something beyond space and time, which is where awareness lives in the Rupert picture and in Hamid's picture. It's very foundational. So when you get up to biology, notice you've got strings. This is the cytoplasmic, this is the cytoskeleton of the cell, which organizes the structure of the cell and is possibly completely superconducting, involving ordered water that we'll talk about. And then this is the large-scale structure of the universe, organized by cosmic strings in various string theory models and in the superfluid model. The dark spaces are actually the string bundles, and this is flows of gravitational, flows of mass under gravitation. Okay, so normally in physics you can't talk about this stuff because in biology, because you only see it in low temperature. There are technological analogs of all things I'm going to talk about in biology here, and the key to, but they're all low temperature. Most quantum computing systems use detailed control of atoms, and they can set up entanglements and so forth. We didn't mention entanglement. As the universe unfolds, it starts from this collective thing, just like the two photons in the EPR experiment. So everything is entangled to begin with, in a sense, just like you'd think of superfluid as fully entangled. And so a web of entanglement spreads as particles appear to be separate and moving in separate directions, but they're still entangled, and they're entangled beyond space-time in a way, because that's the connection is instantaneous. You do something to this one collapses over here as well to a correlated state. Doesn't matter about distance. So right there, space is transcended. And decoherence theory would say that, well, large hot things and so forth, like biological molecules full of water banging into everything, that causes decoherence of these things, erases these entanglements. But in fact, decoherence is itself just further entanglement, and it's all quantum. So if you look at it from the quantum point of view, and awareness is at the quantum level, there's no way that the information is lost. So possibilities are still always there, with some slight probability, like of a chair being on the other side of the room, so forth, the usual thing we talk about in probabilities and approximations in quantum mechanics. So, okay, so we're going to say that forms, that's where actual neural memory is. It's in this decoherence. Decoherence considers it a random heat bath, but it's not random. Nothing is lost. All those little interference patterns, just the amplitude of the possibility is way down below scientific measurement. And for practical purposes, which is all science or any other symbolic operation is about, it is not important for building things or anything else. But for awareness, for creativity, our soul, we have a soul in Diamond Heart, not in Advaita, and that is distributed across the universe and just has a local appearance, because the confluence of waves allows our structure to live, and it self-maintains with loops that we're going to talk about right here. So it's not a mystery anymore. ruby lasers, this thing right here is a beautiful example. They're everywhere in technology of a macroscopic quantum effect. Even a radio wave, an unmodulated radio wave is macroscopic quantum, has macroscopic quantum coherence. So a laser is very interesting. You have two mirrors at the end of this material. There's all kinds of materials that can laze, gases, solids, whatever. This is a ruby laser, one of the early ones. You stimulate with incoherent light, produce it. Atoms are going off by great complexity, not randomness, but the rest of the universe is affecting them. This was David Bohm's theory. David started right from the beginning with everything affects everything else. And so that's why you get quantum randomness. You can isolate a system to a certain degree pretty good, down to where we get a solid probability over many millions, gazillions of trials of there's a lawfulness to the behavior of the probability, but no individual event is predicted. Whereas we could possibly have creative ideas off a vacuum fluctuation. So you could self-organize off that. Okay, so the ruby laser, because the mirrors are parallel, when you stimulate atoms inside to emit photons, the material needs this excited state here. It goes up to an excited state, and then it drops to a metastable state, meaning the dissipative structure, the pumping and everything can hold these atoms. They will stay stably at that state. But if they emit so some of the atoms though emit photons, but they bounce back and forth between the mirrors, and that gets all the other atoms emitting photons exactly in correlated phase. So you create a macroscopic quantum coherent structure up here in this laser cavity. It's another way of looking. You can pump it with light, you can pump it with infrared light, heat radiation, you can pump it with mechanical vibrations, thermal vibrations of the cell walls of a microtubule, as we'll see. And in any event, it is definitely a room temperature quantum phenomena. So biology is telling us that it's all possible to do all kinds of things. In fact, even the zero-point energy, the quantum vacuum, is producing fluctuations of photons in the EM field, and that could possibly be pumping these things too. So biology, when we get to water structure, can be living off this coherence. And this thing can accumulate energy from this incoherent waves like a Maxwell demon and maintain superposition and coherence. Okay, so, whoops, okay, we're going to have to jam in here. So, this is critical stuff from Gerald Pollack at Washington University, and he talks about the fourth phase of water. This was politically trashed years back, and once something gets a bad name in science, and Western science especially, people won't touch it. You can't get grants for it. But he's done this beautiful work. There's no longer any doubt about the existence and the ubiquity of ordered water. On an interface, for example, an air-water interface, surface tension can be due to this rather than the conventional explanation. And so here's the surface, then to a certain distance from the surface, water orders itself. And orders itself in a hexagonal lattice. This is very like ice. Now ice would be 3D. This is a 2D lattice, and behind it in the more pastel color is one deeper. Now if this was ice, then the bonds between this layer and the layer below would be very tight and would be solid. But this is semi-solid. It's liquid crystal. Now liquid crystals are incredible structures. It has free electrons also, so it has an electron superconducting, possibly superconducting plasma, and it forms a battery because it's charged. Where it quits in the bulk water, positive protons, hydronium atoms, hydronium ions collect, and it makes a battery. And this can be charged with light. You can sit here and read a voltage off it in an artificial system with artificial membrane. It runs down in multiple hours, and then you just hit it with infrared radiation again, or heat it up. And that causes the water to structure strongly again, which creates the battery phenomena. So this is also like semiconductors in silicon, but I got to jam through this. Let's see. Explanation of the cell membrane, the membrane voltages in cells, not through the lipid membrane, but through the gel structure of the cell and the ordered water, which binds certain atoms, potassium, and excludes sodium. However, that can reverse and you can produce action potentials that way. If you take the membrane off a cell with detergent, it still exhibits action potential. So the idea of a cell as a bag of water with things banging around in 3D is just flat wrong. Okay, so here's an actual picture, all kind of longitudinal structures. Here's a nanotube with water structure in it. This is a picture of water in such a nanotube, clearly structured. Here's how bound water on the outside of a microtubule in the measurement the Hameroff's crew made on microtubules could be conducting along the outside through the bound water. Okay, here's a conventional picture of a cell, but look how packed it is. I mean, it's full of surfaces and strings again. This is actually what's right under the lipid bilayer membrane is a dense feltwork, and throughout the cell is dense feltworks. This is the cytocellular structure. It's the action decision system for a single cell like a paramecium that Hameroff talks about. There's less than 5% unbound water in this thing. Given all these surfaces and Pollak's results, there's bound water. And there's also quantum electrodynamic calculations showing that water, even in the bulk, forms little coherent domains that act like the laser cavities and store energy. And these things supply activation energy for enzyme reactions. So in fact, the charge, the water, you're taking in half the energy that goes into metabolism when you drink water. Not so much in the food. It's not all in the food. Okay, and then in the structure of a cell, it's full of cavities and compartments, little channels. A Sierpinski sponge is a basic metaphor for this. Here you have a massive channels. You have the big channel, and you have smaller channels instead of similar all the way down. Big dumb square, but it might look more like this within a cell. And within these cavities, you have local equilibria. You can be doing all kinds of storage of energy and so forth. So Hameroff is focusing on a particular thing with the microtubules, but in fact, the possibilities for coherence, macroscopic coordinating entanglements of biological coherence is enormous with water structure and all of the conducting, possibly superconducting fibers all throughout the body. The fascia of the body, collagen is a triple helix. It's got bound water in 3 grooves all along, and fascia connects every single cell to every other and all your bones and holds your whole bodies together in a possibly holographic quantum coherent system. Mechanical deformations produce electrical signals, vice versa. Okay, in quantum computation, you use superposition in a particular way. Here's Hameroff's story that these things go into conformational changes. That's an old story, but it could be the charge separations that he's talking about lately. But in any event, it goes through a cycle whereby it builds up this coherence of superposition. And in that, there's a vast array of coordinated entangled possibilities, one of which would look like this, one of which might look like this. It's a many-body system. Current quantum computers down here are up to like 7, or there's a private company called D-Wave that claims 100, maybe 150 qubits. There are so many qubits in this system, it's insane, and it's way beyond the capacity of physics so far to analyze a many-body system, but it's getting there. And a random search or a quantum search, if you classically search this grid here, you throw a coin at each step, decide which way to go. When you're done, you've explored a narrow range of that. In the quantum system, you can explore in parallel. Instead of choosing one branch, you break apart, and you simultaneously explore all branches. And in an actual quantum computation, you have to set it up so everything cancels but the result that solves your problem. In this case, we're just showing a search process. And there's such a thing as directed evolution, where you can mutate a bacterium to lose a gene it needs to survive in the medium, and within hours, days, the population will rediscover by quantum search, presumably, that state. So just to finish here, we get to the brain. Here's your cognitive loops going up here where you're making categories out of things. Here comes primary sensory stuff from your entire inner world up to insular cortex, for example. And if you're getting quantum superposition in the microtubules spread from cell to cell by fascia or gap junctions or whatever you want, there's a million mechanisms, unknown what, but okay, then you're in a state this thing is constantly trying to perturb the state with ideas, you know, fearful things of the future, wonderful things, whatever. But if you are meditating and you stay down here in the primary, in your primary process, as Freud called it, pre-verbal, then you can operate beautifully. And musical inspiration is my, improvisation is my thing, and you don't need a language word in your head at all. So you can evolve completely intuitively. As Ramana Maharshi would say, the advanced students just come and sit with him, and the teaching happens without language. So in that case, you are open to, in your superpositions, to quantum fluctuations from the vacuum and the wisdom of the entire universe. If our memories are in the vacuum, then all our memories are in common. When our intuition goes into direct knowing to come up with a statement, an answer, a sentence, then the nervous system is there to carry out carry it out in time, in a higher motor hierarchy, where you have the idea, then you have the sentence, then you have the word, then you have the phonemes of the word. All does that automatically to spit it out, but it's all way above the real quantum processing at the molecular level. And at that level, you have direct knowing, and you have the possibility of realizing that you are experiencing the entire universe, the unity of the universe beyond space and time, through direct extrasensory perception in the superposed state that you're in. All right, thank you. Okay, I'm going to hit the beginning one more time. Let's cancel this out. I don't know if this is even working. Did this shut off like it did last time? No, seems to be flying. Some form or other. Okay, so let's try that one more time. So this is the abstract, and it's broken into pieces here that show up as at the top of the slides throughout the talk to give some sort of an outline here. And this is an attempt to make a science story that fits Advaita and Diamond Heart's spiritual point of view. I've been in Diamond Heart work for a long time. I'm a biophysicist who's worked with Walter Freeman in physiology at UC Berkeley, and Mo Hirsch in mathematics on nonlinear dynamics. And we analyzed oscillating cortical areas and how they can come into synchrony to transfer information and constitute, at least at the level of the idea of it, the stream of awareness, the inner movie, if you will. So attention is a critical process in spiritual work, because you learn in spiritual practice to pay attention directly to the present and skip all the talk, the language level, because even though spiritual teaching is in language, which the point of it, of course, is to learn directly from your experience without the language. However, the two feed each other. As you learn, it maps into language. Language gives you new possibilities for looking at your direct experience, which is intuition. So in the discussion last night, they were all on stage talking about, you know, we can't, language has any symbolic system has absolute limits. No idea is ever equivalent or identical to an actual experience. It goes into memory, it gets chunked out of the connectivity of primal experience, and the map is never the territory. So that's absolute limit to it. You just work within the symbolic systems to get the best correspondence of a useful sort. That's all science is. It's useful knowledge, as Don Hoffman was showing. You don't get in contact through science, at least at our current measurement stage, with experience. It's in the head. However, spiritual work teaches you to unfold, pay attention in places you wouldn't normally, and expand what Julia was saying is this tiny brain conceptual awareness, eventually, because everything's made of awareness, to all the other possibilities, until you recognize you can experience the unity of the universe at one shot and recognize that's what you're made of, that's who you are, instead of your idea of yourself. Okay, so what's a material that could be like a, there's a thing called a superfluid, superconductivity. There's another version, Bose-Einstein condensation, where you get to see sort of the essence of quantum stuff. It's particular, these are helium atoms being cooled to a very low temperature, but once they go into this superposition state, it's like a soup where it becomes one complete holistic system. Anything done to one part of it is transmitted instantly to the other parts. They're not distinguishable. It's uncertainty of positions. So in a thing of hand size, you can't tell where any atom is. It's still got atoms and mass in there, but there's something essentially connected about it, and that's why in the way in which this is a model of possibly of consciousness. And we would take this to be the absolute background, the screen that Rupert Spira would talk about. It has no structure. It's the perfect witness. It has no form. Okay, so let's